Hi everyone, this is Ola Radka from Start With Self. For those who haven't met me yet, I am a psychotherapist and I help people make changes in their life by working with their subconscious mind. And I want to welcome you to Start With Self podcast episode 1. My intention with this podcast is to collect stories from various people about how they created life that is aligned with their true self. And in this episode number 1, I had a huge pleasure to have a conversation with a dear friend of mine, Ralph Anania. Ralph is a business coach, but he's not any business coach. He actually has more than 35 years of business experience. He, in his lifetime, founded more than 30 multi-million-dollar businesses. He's an award-winning entrepreneur, author, and international speaker. In our conversation, we didn't talk entirely about business. We dived into such subjects as resilience, confidence, and self-love, and how you can develop these qualities to create not only a business, but life that you really want, that will be in harmony with your true self. So I do hope that you will find this episode inspiring and valuable. By the way, if you are watching this episode on Start With Self YouTube channel, remember that you can also listen to the audio on any podcast app that there is. And if you are listening on a podcast app, remember that you can watch a video of this episode on Start With Self YouTube channel. However you are watching or listening to it, enjoy, and thank you so much for being here. Hi everyone, this is the first episode of Start With Self podcast, and it is my honor and pleasure to have my dear friend Ralph Anania in this first episode. So welcome Ralph, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's I think my bigger pleasure. And before we dive deeper into Ralph's life, according to him and in his own words, I'm going to read a short bio, which is the formal version of who Ralph actually is. But I'm hoping to get a glimpse of more personal Ralph and who Ralph is in his heart. And from what I have known Ralph, my impression is that he's not only a very successful businessman, but also a very beautiful and spiritual person. So here is the official bio of Ralph Anania. With over 35 years of business experience, an Australian Entrepreneur Award winner, international keynote speaker and author, Ralph Anania is regarded as an authority in business transformation. Ralph has an impressive track record spanning over 35 years, where he has successfully transformed 30 businesses of his own into highly efficient enterprises, one of which exceeding $130 million in annual revenue. Ralph has shared his real business experience with thousands of clients in a variety of industries in 13 different countries around the globe. And although Ralph has experienced his fair share of adversity in both his personal and professional life, his never give up attitude is what drives him to continually make a positive difference in the world, where his mission is to enrich the small business community by encouraging sustainable change, not just in the organization, but most importantly, where it all stems from, its people. Ralph has just finished writing his book, Life Done Right, which will be released early next year. Well, that's a big wow from me when I read your bio, and congratulations on the book, Ralph.
Thank you.
So, who is Ralph? What is your story? And if you were to choose 3 most defining moments from your life that contributed, well, to your success, but also to this attitude of never giving up in life, what would you tell us?
Well, I was born and raised in an immigrant family. My parents came from Italy in the early 60s. My dad came in 1960, and my mum, he came out here to earn enough money to bring my mum and my two sisters and brother out in 62. So there was some tough times in Italy, and work was hard in those days. So he searched for a better life here in Australia, and so I was born here, and after me is another brother. So being raised in an immigrant family in the late 60s and early 70s was not easy. It was a tough period, and you had to start to learn resilience, even though I didn't know it was resilience at the time. But you had to start to learn it at a young age, and there was a lot of challenges at an early age, even at school, because even though I was born in Australia and one would define me as Australian, I was still renowned, or known rather, not renowned, but known, as the child of immigrant parents, and I was, in a lot of ways, bullied, but bullied wasn't a word in those days. People didn't even know what bullying wasn't a thing, but it was very, very loud and clear. And even teachers at school were a little bit racist in those days. And you don't realize until you sort of get on and older in life, and you see sort of where everything has balanced out to today. So at a very young age, it was always having to fight some sort of fight. There was always some challenge that you had to push through. And my parents couldn't speak English that well, and we had the local fruit and veg store in the suburb I was living in. So it was sort of basically, before and after school, we would work. Weekends we would work. In those days it was only 5.5 day of trading. Saturday was not a full day, and Sunday was closed. But we would still, work on the weekends because we would prepare. And being a family business in those days, a family business was a family business. I mean, everybody was involved in some way or another. Mm-hmm. And from a young age, I basically, followed my dad everywhere. So from the age of 4, I would go to the central markets with my dad. And, it was a big experience for me because, it was a lot of activity, a lot happening. So it was exciting, and I continued on with that, and I really enjoyed it. And I learned a lot from my dad in what trading was all about, the negotiations, the interactions, the relationships that he built with his suppliers. It was all exciting, but at the time you don't realize that you're taking all that on because it's happening subconsciously. Yeah. It's only later in life that those lessons come out. So the entrepreneurial side for me started at a very young age. And
at the age of 4?
Well, that's when I started, really, going with my dad. But, and it continued. It never really stopped. From then on, I was just hooked. I guess I enjoyed that more because I never enjoyed school. I mean, school was always a challenge for me. Mm-hmm. And it was hard because my parents, wouldn't check homework because they didn't understand the language. So it wasn't like I was going to get in trouble if I didn't do my homework. But I didn't enjoy school because, the teachers, as I say, not all teachers, but there were teachers that were racist. There were kids that were just bullies. I mean, the word wog was used quite often, that, you were tagged as a wog. And I do not like that word at all anymore. Like, today, I just do not like it. So as I tended to gravitate more towards, the excitement of business, I disliked school even more, and I just didn't want to really go to school. So I ended up owning my first business at the age of 20 with my two brothers. And from there, we just sort of continued to grow over the years. But predominantly been in food, in fresh produce majority of my life, but I've been in food and food manufacturing and, processing and, everything and anything to do basically with food as an industry. So, I learned a lot along the way because I've made a lot of mistakes. So, I guess when you say what are the three things, the first one is obviously being engaged with Dad enough that was going to pave the way for my entrepreneurial future. Secondly was understanding the challenges from a young age. So those challenges were very, very relevant at a young age, that I was having to compete against something else or someone else that I had to continually keep pushing forward. So that line of never giving up, started at a very young age, because I knew if I gave up, I would never amount to anything. And I just had to keep pushing through and find my way. And one of the things that has defined who I am today is the ability that I had from a young age, without even knowing it, to want to be something. And if I didn't continue to push through naturally, I wouldn't be, where I am today. So, and then obviously you go through life and that continues with you, but you just continue to do your best and push through. And that's where it all sort of stems from. So it's in my own DNA that I just, I don't give up. And I have taught that to my children now. And I see a lot of that coming out in them, because, they're determined as well. And they've done a lot of good things themselves and kept pushing through. So yeah, that's pretty much, just in a short explanation.
Yeah. So Ralph, while I was listening to this story that you just told me, which I didn't know that you started so early going to the markets with your dad. So the name of my business is Start with Self. So I guess in your case, you really started with yourself, even in the subconscious way, at an extremely early age, when actually we are like little sponges. So without knowing, we learn so much up to the age of 5, especially from our parents, since they are our guides in this world, let's say. So when you think about this phrase, starting with self, what does that mean to you? How do you, and you also mentioned this in the bio that you shared with me, that when you work with people who have small businesses, you actually focus on the owner of the business, since that's the heart of the business. So when you want to help people grow their businesses, you start from what's happening actually within them, which has huge influence on the business itself. So what does that mean to you, to start with self?
Look, and this just came to me now, so it's probably just an easy way to explain it, but it's no different to when you're flying, when you're on a plane and you're flying somewhere and they say to you, put your mask on first, right? Because if you can't put your mask on first, you can't save anybody else. You will never be able to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve if you don't start with yourself. So if you have a whole host of issues internally, you're never going to be able to achieve anything for anybody else, because that will come through, it'll show. And one of the challenges that I have, which, in some cases it does sort of tend to hold me back a little bit, is that I am so confident in what I do that a lot of people take that as arrogance. And it's not arrogant at all. It's just that I'm comfortable and confident in my own skin, right? I learned a long time ago that what people think of me is none of my business, right? It's none of my business what people think of me. And if I get caught up in what they're thinking about me, they're robbing me from helping somebody else, because my focus is on them rather than the people that actually matter. And I learned a long time ago that if you're on stage and you're speaking to an audience, there's always going to be somebody in the audience that is going to have something to say about you. And if you focus on that 1 or 2 or 3 or however many people in the audience that you feel that they're talking about you or don't like you for whatever reason, the rest of the room is going to miss out. So don't focus on those people. Focus on getting your story or your message or your wisdom or your skill, whatever it may be, out to the people that will value you. And the ones that don't value you or don't respect you, don't worry about them. It's not your business. It's, that's their problem, because they're carrying baggage. And unfortunately, there are people that don't like me, and I think that applies to everybody. There are people that don't like you for no reason at all. They just don't connect, and it's usually because your spirit and their spirit clashes.
Yeah.
And it's because your spirit is a stronger spirit, that it's invading their spirit, and they don't even know it. Because how many people, you would know this extremely well, how many people have no idea what their internal spirit is doing, because they're not connected to their internal spirit. So, you have to start within. You have to start within. And most people can't look in the mirror and say, I love what I see. Not like, I love what I see.
Are you at this point of loving?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I've been like that for a long time.
How do you get to that point of actually loving yourself? Because that's I think, yes, people not liking themselves, that causes so much pain and just obstacles in people's life. How did you get to actually not even liking yourself, but loving yourself? If you can share one tip.
Just, what the most important thing is, that when you get to a point where you think you've achieved everything, and you've become successful and you have everything that you need, and you think you're untouchable, and then something happens that brings you back to earth, it's the humility, right? It's learning to be humble. And when you get to that point where you've reached rock bottom, that you actually, to get back up, you have to then love what you see, because if you don't, you won't pick yourself up. And that has happened to me. And I've been through enough in my life where I've had to do that a number of times. But what's got me through even more is the fact that, yes, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm comfortable with who I am. I'm comfortable with what I've become. I never believe or think that I'm better than anyone else. There was a period in my life where I operated in ego nearly all the time, and that's not where you want to be. Today my ego would be 5%, and my spirit is 95%. And the way that I explain that when I'm speaking to people or when I'm presenting is that your ego is what drives you, but your spirit, your inner spirit, we all have our own internal spirit. That's what guides and protects you. You need ego, because your ego is what drives you. You've got to have some drive and motivation, and that's good. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But if you live in ego, you're going to go too fast, and you're going to want to do everything, and you're going to do some damage, because you're going to hurt people. You don't care who you walk over. You're just going to keep going. But your spirit actually protects you from doing that. Most people don't understand their internal spirit. That's the biggest issue. And they live in a place of ego, and they get caught up in the material world. And the material things at some point run out of steam. You're going to get bored with material things. At some point, when you buy a new car and you love the new car, at some point it's not new anymore. So you're going to get sick of it. So to keep motivated, you've got to buy another new car. And then when does that stop?
It's never enough.
It's never enough. When you get to a point of being balanced, and it's hard work, don't kid yourself that, it just, you snap your fingers. But what happens is, over a period of time and years, it doesn't become hard work. It becomes just a natural way of living, right? And you just go through that as if it's like waking up every day. It just happens, right? But in the initial stages, it is hard, because unfortunately society teaches us to be competitive. So that means if you've got something, I've got to go and have something better. If you've got something big, I've got to go and have it bigger. you know, where I live, you know, this whole estate or the suburb where I live in, over the years, we have seen that there's been a lot of influence of wealth come into the area. And you can just see when you drive around the area that the houses are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because every time somebody comes in, they want to build a bigger house. And when is big enough, you know? And you see this because everybody wants to come and do things and do them bigger and better than the person before them. So, you know, until you get to a point where you are confident and comfortable in the person that you become, and you can look in the mirror and say, I love the way that I am, the way that I look. And you know what? Yes, I've got some wrinkles. Big deal. Do I need Botox? No, I don't. You know, I don't need it. That's who I am. You know, that's who I am. And it's important that you get to that point. Now, I enjoy staying fit, so I keep reasonably fit. I enjoy being well groomed. That's a trait that my mother taught me from a young age. So, you know, yes, I like to look good. I never go 2 days without shaving, because that's just, you know, how I am. But I'm comfortable with that. I don't do it to impress anybody else. I do it because I'm comfortable in living that way. So yes, it is important. And one of the things that I actually did or made a mistake in is that when I started speaking and presenting a number of years back, I was taught that I had to be a certain way and become a certain person on stage. Mm-hmm. And it was the most uncomfortable thing that I had to do. And whilst I don't do that anymore, because I've learned that that's not who I am, mm-hmm. but what it did is it taught me to be uncomfortable, right? It taught me to be uncomfortable, but be comfortable being uncomfortable. So I had to get to a point where I was uncomfortable, but I had to be comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Today, that person is no longer around, because I don't want to be that person. I'm who I am. And if you don't like me the way I am, I'm sorry, I can't help you, because if I'm showing you a false me, then you don't know the real me. And I need you to, if I want a connection with you, I want you to know the real me. Otherwise, our whole relationship is built on sand, you know, and it's going to fall down. So that's why, you know, I've sort of become the person I am today. And I've seen it too often. You know, I've traveled the world. I've spoken, you know, hundreds of times on stage, and I've seen some, you know, very well-to-do speakers out there that are living a very different life to what they are on stage. And it's sad, you know, it's sad. But, you know, they're comfortable being that way. So, you know, getting back to the original question, you have to continually look in the mirror and be comfortable with who you're seeing, but not the external, internal. You know, forget about external. That you know, you can have a shave, you can put on makeup, you can do your hair. That's external, you know, but comfortable with who you are internally.
Yes.
And that's where it starts. So
thank you so much for that, Ralph. That's very beautiful and valuable insight for me, and I'm sure for the listeners as well. You mentioned that 5% of ego and 95% of the spirit, that's how you operate right now. Mm-hmm. Do you have, or did you have, any practices that helped you balance these two spheres that we have, let's say the zone of ego and the zone of the spirit? Because now you said that it's kind of natural, that's your natural way of living, but when you were transitioning, can you think of anything that helped you make that shift?
Yeah, many. So I'm a you know, a person of faith, and I believe in God, and I've, you know, had God as my guidance forever. And when you go through some challenging times, and you know, you're in deep conversation with God, when things, you know, it's funny, because even when people don't believe in God and something bad happens, the first person they
And
go
they
to
do.
is, God, please help me, right?
Yeah,
So
so true.
so when you actually, get into a deep conversation with God, where you can actually, get on that spiritual level, um, many times where I've been in situations where I've, fallen back on a conversation with God. Many times he said to me, okay, now you've done it your way. Now how about we try my way? And every time he's done that, he's just broken me down and broken me down and broken me down until the point where I go, okay, I got it, no problem. I'm gonna take your lessons now. And that's really what happens. That's really, I mean, that's not complicated. It's nothing else. It's just my faith that has, led me to where I am today, and being able to get to that point where, you know, you just have to humble yourself. And, it's hard to do sometimes. It is definitely hard to do, because your ego will always want to take over, and the ego is driven by the mind, right? And the mind is fabricated by what you're thinking. Whereas, the heart and spirit works together in seeing what you can't see. And that is something that I have learnt so well over the years, and I instill it in everyone that I come in contact with, that I am mentoring or sharing my wisdom with, is always look for and be open to seeing what you can't see. And that means that be alert and be aware of the things that are around you that you normally wouldn't be aware of. We go through day by day life that so much happens that we are not aware of it. It happens around us, but we're not aware of it. And if you just open up, your parameters a little bit more, to see a little bit more of and take note of what's happening around you, that's growth. That's how you grow.
Around you and inside you as well, right?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah. And the things, when you say inside you, yes, there are many times where something may happen and you feel something, but you don't know what you're feeling. That's a message. That's a message telling you that something around you is happening. You've got to then ask yourself, what did I just miss? Something just doesn't feel right. Something is telling me not to do this. Something telling me not to go down this road. Something's not right. What is it?
Yeah, that's interesting. So, for example, when people get trapped in a cycle of some negative events in their life, like some people go back to the same scenario over and over again, this is a clear sign that there's something to work on inside them, that they find themselves in the same external circumstances. Is that what you mean, for example?
Yeah.
Ralph, I absolutely loved when you use the term conversations with God. You didn't use the word praying to God. You used the word conversation.
That's what prayer is. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, but prayer is a conversation. That's what it is.
Well, I think many people maybe don't realize, because they keep talking when they pray. They just keep talking. And I think there's too little listening.
Correct.
I think that's how I see this definition of praying. So how did you start having conversations with God?
Well, look, I went through a period where I wanted to learn more about what God was and what God meant for me. And I felt that I needed to understand more about what God was, what the Bible was, the lessons throughout, because the Bible's full of lessons, but if you don't understand how to read the Bible, then you're not going to get the lessons. And most people that don't understand it think that you've got to read the Bible from cover to cover, and you don't. Right? There's many books in the Bible, and there's many stories in the Bible. And one of my favorite stories is the book of Job. How he had everything and it was taken away from him, but God gave it back to him, tenfold because of his discipline, and staying true to God, and not being distracted by what had been put in front of him. So you need to be in a place of real silence to hear. There's a saying, it's funny because sometimes in movies you do pick up lines. There's a saying in one of the Star Wars movie by one of the characters, which was Yoda, who I loved when I was a kid. But as you get older, you learn and you listen to some of those lines, and and in one of the lines he says, to hear, you must listen. And
seems
when
so
you think about
obvious,
that,
but
yeah, right. But most people don't, right? And most people want to hear their own voice. You have to stop and listen, and then you will hear the message, right? If you're not listening, you're not going to get the message. You're not going to hear the message. So it is important, to and again, when you look at what the Bible teaches us, I mean, there's a verse in the Bible, and I can't tell you which verse it is, but the verse says, "Be still and know that I am God," and meaning be still and I'm there, and you will hear me. And that's important. So a lot of times when I have those conversations, and another line that I use a lot, which I learned from Dr. Wayne Dyer, God bless him,
I
who
love
was an amazing mentor of mine, and I had the privilege of meeting him. He's just a wonderful human being, and God certainly has an angel up there with him now. But he used to always say, let go and let God. And you let go and you trust in God, that God will guide you. That's what that means. When you let go and let God, you trust that God will guide you in the right direction. But you have to be able to fully submit to that. You can't challenge that. You can't half do it. And I share the story of when God said to Moses to lead the people to the water, and he would part the water. He said, lead them through. He didn't say, go and put your toe in and check and see if I'm going to part the waters. He said, go with confidence and I will lead your people and I will part the waters. So he had to believe that God was going to part the waters for him to lead his people in there, not test the water and see if God was telling the truth or not. He had to believe it. And that's the challenge with most Christians, that they're Christians, they might go to church, they might pray, but then they're expecting a miracle to happen like that because, well, I prayed and I asked for something, but I didn't get it. And I say to them, well, it's not McDonald's. You don't go to the window or drive through and ask for something and you're going to receive it, right? It's, you've got to trust, you've got to believe. And, God does things in his own time, because I can tell you categorically, and I could talk for hours on this alone. Ola, one of the things that I have learnt a lot when it comes to trusting God is that sometimes what I think I want is not what God wants. And I cannot tell you the amount of times that God has saved me from
what you
taking
wanted.
the wrong path. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing, yeah.
And every time when I look back and I say, wow, if I had gone down that path or taken that opportunity, or it, would have ended in disaster, and yet, it wasn't meant to be. And when I say it wasn't meant to be, I was seriously being protected, and there's been many times where I've been very disappointed because a deal hasn't happened, an opportunity hasn't come through. I've put a lot of time and effort into something and it hasn't evolved. And when I look back and I say, thank you, God, because if it wasn't for you making me aware of it, I would have been, it would have been a different outcome. So, I again, that's where you have to learn to trust. And yes, it's great to go to church and be in a congregation with other believers, but you don't need to be at church to be a Christian or a Catholic or whatever it is that you want to be. Let's just say Christian, but you don't need to go to church to pray.
Yeah.
You don't. And when people say to me, yeah, but what do you pray and how do you pray? If I have to be totally open and transparent with you, I would pray, meaning I would have a conversation with God 20 times a day, at least.
And that's
When I'm driving, when I'm sitting at my desk, when I'm whatever. It could just be,
what
just
do you
sitting in
say then
silence.
in those little moments during the day? Like what do you say? Do you say just please guide me, or
Yeah, it's just usually, I might be sort of stuck in what I think. I maybe ask for wisdom and some guidance, just to give me some clarity. And I've got to leave it, because if I continue to push through, anything that I do from that point is going to be from me. And it can't be from me, because then it's going to be wrong. So I need to get clarification. And, sometimes the clarification will come in a dream. Sometimes the clarification will just wake me up in the middle of the night and go, that's what I need to do. And I've just got to leave it sometimes. And it could be longer than days. It could be that I've just got to leave it until something comes. And if nothing comes, I do nothing about it, because it's not right. And I'm talking about, things that are challenging that I need to address, or a decision that needs to be made that is bigger than just making a decision. It's about searching for the right answers and taking it away from what we see as the secular world, which is influenced heavily by what we have externally, which is, media, social media, people's opinions. That is what we live in day to day. I mean, and that's not always the right way to go. Some people have it naturally where they just, everything to them is an intuition. It's a very strong feeling. That's a very strong spiritual gift. A lot of people have to work hard at finding that gift. Yeah. Where the challenge is, and where I see with most people that I work with, because as you said, I work with people. When people engage me for my services, they engage me for my business experience and wisdom. But what really happens is that I want to know about them. I want to know what's happening in their life. I want to know what's stopping them, because if I can't work with them first, then it doesn't matter what we work on in business. It'll never be right. So you need to understand internally what's going on before you start to work on other things. And sometimes people just don't know what's going on, because we live through life and we put layers. And every time we put layers, we're putting up a wall, and then another wall, and then another wall. And as we go through life, when we get to, me in my 50s, you've got a lot of walls that you need to start to break down. And it's like, it's the same. The best way to explain it is it's like a person that's put on, 50 kilos over a number of years, right? And then all of a sudden they want to lose weight. They're not going to lose that 50 kilos overnight, because they didn't put it on overnight. So they have to do it over maybe a 2-year period, right? That slowly. The same applies in these situations. When you work with somebody that has layers, many layers, you can't break all those layers down at once, because it's too much. They get overwhelmed and they shut down. So you have to you have to look at everybody individually and walk them through, so they can understand what they're up against, and break it down little by little, so they actually get the lesson as well as the experience. Because you can't just give the lesson without the experience. They have to be able to understand and see the change and feel the change, and then live the change before they move on to the next thing. If you give them too much, it's too much. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really it. That's just how I have my conversations with God.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this, Ralph. Ralph, I know that you get up early in the morning. What is your morning ritual that sets you for the whole day? Because I believe mornings are extremely important. And I see when I get a bit lazy and I don't do my morning ritual, which is a bit of meditation and yoga and writing and reading something inspirational. Like I have a few books that I just open randomly and I treat it as a message from God or from the universe, whatever sentence I see. What is your morning ritual? So, sorry, I didn't finish that thought. So when I don't do it, I feel like I'm starting the day feeling that I'm just reacting to the day, but not really responding from this mindful place, let's say, or from the place of more stillness. What is your morning ritual?
So I like to I like to train. It's important to be active because it just makes a difference in my day. And I like to train in the morning. A lot of people train at night, but I prefer to do it in the morning. It really sets me up for the day, wakes me up. I spend even in bed when I wake up in the morning, I try to spend that first, even if it's just 5 minutes, but getting into meditation and being in that place of complete silence and letting the spirit flow through me. Now, some people call that prayer, some people call it meditation, some people put on a meditation guidance, whatever that may be. And for everybody it's different, but that's sort of what I do. And then I make my bed, because I was taught from a young age that the very first thing, I make my bed because it sets you up for discipline for the day. So if that's the first thing that you do, it's done. And I've always been like that, and I even teach it today because it's important that it sets you up for discipline. And then I like to train.
I agree.
I train. I try and train at least 4 mornings a week. If I can do more, I do more. And yes, sometimes I do train. In the afternoon or night, if my son wants to go, I'll go with him as well. We train together sometimes. But then I tend to come back and make sure that I've got my list of what I want to do for the day. So I generally have a task list every day that I want to achieve. And if I don't achieve it, it'll move into the next day. If I don't achieve some item or a task, I always make sure that it's still there in front of me, because most people tend to dismiss what they don't do and then find that at some point they look back and they completely discarded it. And I don't like to do that. I like to just keep things flowing. But most of it just comes down to being disciplined. Now, again, when I say I try and train at least 4 days, that's usually because I have clients in the US, and my mornings, sometimes my first meetings at 3:30 a.m. So I've got 3:30 a.m., 4:30 a.m., 5:30 a.m. So I've got different times for different time zones. So I just try and balance as best as I can. But the morning for me is really important because it gives you that energy for the day. Now, I have always been that way because in the fresh produce industry, for the best part of my life, I was up at between 2 and 3 a.m. every day. So you're not that you get used to it, because you don't. I mean, I don't like getting up at 2 or 3 a.m. But it's just, the morning is just it's a much better time for me. Nighttime, I can sort of go into the night a little bit, but I become a little bit brain dead from 6 p.m. onwards. I really don't want to be thinking, because my best time is in the morning. I'm most alert, and that's where I'm at my best. So you've got me at my best.
Yes, thank you for that. What time did you get up today then?
3:30. I had a US call at 3, so I got up at 3 o'clock.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for the morning then, Ralph. Ralph, and I'm starting to be mindful of time. So 2 more questions. What one advice would you give to your younger self? To that
I think
age of 4.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've thought about that a lot, actually. One piece of advice I would give to my younger self would be, don't ever discard the value of time, because when we're young, we do not value time. We think we're invincible. We think that, it's never, life is never going to end. But as you get older, you start to value time. You start to value every minute of the day that you have, because when you see people around you that are no longer around you, you start to think that time is very precious. And because it's like the air that we breathe, we don't think about it, right? Because it's there and it's free, but it's not free. It's not free because we do take it for granted. So I would definitely, that would be the number one priority piece of advice that I would give my younger self is never ever discard the value of time.
I will,
because what you are doing today, you will never get back. Tomorrow is another day. You'll never get today back. Today's gone. When we move into tomorrow, you can never get today back.
I guess it's extremely helpful to remember this when you feel like falling into the trap of worrying, or you are about to have a fight with your spouse or partner, to just remember you will never get this moment back. So let's not waste it. Well, thank you for spending these moments with me today, Ralph.
My pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure as well. And I know that you've just finished your book, which is, I think, a huge, huge thing to do. I've always had a dream of writing a book, and I feel I will one day. But I used to dream of writing a crime story, and I think the book will be completely different. So congratulations on your book. Could you tell us a little bit why you wrote this book? Why did you have the desire or need?
The book came to life because I mentored a young lady by the name of Emily Gower a number of years back, and she was in her early 20s, and she got so much out of my wisdom that she said to me, and she's a publisher, and she's my publisher, of course, and she's written 12 books now, and she's got a successful publishing business, all stemmed on the back of some of the time that we spent together. And obviously she did the work, and this is very important with a lot of people, that it's not just when you sit with somebody and you go through, you've actually got to do the work to be able to achieve the results. And she's done the work and she's become very successful. But she said to me back then, she said, Ralph, there is so much wisdom in what you've got to share that I would love for you to write a book one day, because people my age would love to learn from someone like you. And after being through the challenges that I've been through in my life, especially over the last 6 or 7 years, I felt it was time. I just felt it was right. And I had a conversation with Emily, and it was amazing, because she was able to package it for me in a way where I could. When I first wanted to write a book, it was, and like everybody, and I'm sure that you thought this as well, is where do you start? How do you structure it? What are you going to talk about? All these questions come in, and that's what stops people from writing a book. So there was, it was very important for me to ensure that it was structured correctly, and that's why I've engaged Emily to do that. But there's a lot of people out there that have written books that have had other people write for them, and I never wanted to do that. I wanted the book to be a book that I wrote. That was very important for me, the messages that are in the book. So the book is about my journey. It's not a bio. It's not a business book. I did not want it to be a business book, because there are a million business books out there, but I want it to be a book of hope and inspiration. That's what I really wanted. I wanted anybody at any position to be able to pick up this book and take something out of it, and not so much the lessons, but basically the guidance of what I had experienced. And if it can help somebody, then that's my purpose. I mean, it's been able to give somebody hope and inspiration to become a better version of themselves. And for me, it was something that I wanted to share. Now, when you say the book's called Life Done Right, and in some ways, people have said, that seems a bit arrogant. And it's not about that, the way that I've lived life is right, but it's about the journey and what I've had as challenges and what I'm able to share as my experience and wisdom from that. It's not that there's no right, there's no wrong. It's what one gets out of it that will be able to help them and guide and navigate them through life. So yeah, it's exciting, and I'm glad it's taken me nearly 18 months to get it done. I had this great vision that I would. Yes, I had this great vision when I first started writing, and it was all exciting because I'm pretty structured, and I said I'm going to allow myself 1 hour a day for writing. And it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work. You've got to be in the right mind frame. You've got to be able to be in that moment. So it's taken me, just on 18 months now, but we should be ready to go to print in the next few weeks. So I'm hoping that by the end of January, early February, we'll have the printed copy out, and it's done.
Can't wait to read it. Thank you so much, Ralph. Could you share with us where people can find you? They want to reach out to you. What's the best way to reach out?
It's probably easiest just to go to my website, which is just ralphanania.com. And, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn, wherever. But my website will guide them to me anyway. So they can connect with me directly. They can book a session if they want to book a complimentary session. That's probably the best place to find me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ralph. It was a beautiful conversation. I certainly didn't expect that we would talk about such deep topics like God and how to have conversations with him or her. So thank you so much. I certainly love going deeper and to get to the essence of how we can be more true to ourselves in life generally. So thank you so much. And I hope we can maybe continue our conversation sometime in the future in another episode of Start With Self.
Yeah, for sure.
That would be wonderful. Thank
you for having me.
Thank you so much. And to all those listening or watching this, see you in another episode of Start With Self podcast.